We've got, all right, we just click on record. We're going to record this because we like to save these for our students who can't make it, who might have lunch meetings. We want to share this good content and be able to post it on our website. But welcome everybody. My name is Maggie Tomas and I am the Executive Director of the Career Center. And I also geek out a bit on careers and social impact and helping students find jobs that sometimes are outside of what we would title normal business careers. I've been working with this type of student for several years now. So I'm really excited when Bridget asked me, hey Maggie, will you put together a panel with folks who've been successful in finding careers in social impact, whether that's from starting their own venture or working for an organization. I was excited to bring these alum in. Some of them I've been able to keep in touch with throughout the years, and some of them I haven't seen in a couple of years. So I'm excited to see these folks here today. With me, I have Samantha Bailey, who is with Shared Capital Cooperative. She's a lending team manager. Leah Battin, who is with CECP. She's a senior associate. Sarah Carroll, who is the executive director and founder of Greener Pastures, and Elizabeth Emery, who is the network president at Team Shares. So they all have very unique paths. I'm really excited to have them here today. And we're going to kick it off with having them tell a little bit about themselves and what they currently do and describe their work a bit. So Samantha, will you go ahead and share a little bit about yourself and kick us off today?
Absolutely. Welcome, everybody. Really excited to be here. Like Maggie said, I manage the lending team at Shared Capital Cooperative. We are a CDFI financial institution. CDFI stands for Community Development Financial Institution, meaning we get some money from the Fed to do what we do, and we focus on low and moderate income communities in our lending practice. The other focus we have is lending to cooperative businesses. So any business or enterprise that is a shared ownership model is our focus. And so, yeah, I'll just leave it there, but generally in finance and working with cooperatives.
Thank you, Samantha. Leah, you're next.
Hi, everybody. My name is Leah Battin. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm Senior Associate of Advisory with CECP, which stands for Chief Executives for Corporate Purpose. We are a coalition of several of the big companies, generally $2 billion plus in revenue, primarily US based, but some international. And we, as a nonprofit, support these companies with their corporate social responsibility strategy, data gathering, help them on their purpose journey and how they're telling their stories. And so I've been there just over a year full time now after graduating from the MBA in 2021.
Thank you, Leah. Sarah.
Hi, everyone, and thanks to Maggie and Bridget and the whole team for being here, and nice to see some new and familiar faces. My name is Sarah Carroll. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the founder and executive director of Greener Pastures. We're a 501c3 nonprofit on a mission to help our food system move away from factory farming and towards humane, sustainable, just, and local food and farms, and have been incredibly lucky to be able to spend my time while a student in the Carlson MBA program and the Humphrey MPP program, class of 2020, incubating this nonprofit, and now get a chance to work with our amazing team and volunteers and board members running a handful of programs and services around building a better food system. So excited to talk with you more about that today.
Thank you, Sarah. And last but not least, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Maggie, and welcome to everybody. I'm a 2018 full-time MBA grad, and initially after graduating, I actually went into consulting, worked at Deloitte for 3 years, and then my current position is, as Maggie said, is with Team Shares, which is a startup that is currently purchasing small businesses all over the country to convert them to employee-owned businesses, and really with a drive to kind of solve this systemic problem of retiring owners and this huge segment of the economy, both from a services but also a jobs perspective, that is in danger of disappearing over the next 15 to 20 years. So it's a small network for right now. I think they just closed on their 60th company with another 20 or so under LOI. And then my role within that is I'm actually a small business president down in Egan. And so my company does receipt paper distribution, which at first glance may not seem like a social impact motivated business, but again, really focusing on the employee ownership, the engagement, the education, and the ultimate benefit to the community that it brings to give all that back.
Thank you. So students or alumni attending, I have several questions that this lovely group of professionals are prepared to answer, and I will start kicking it off with questions. But the hope is that all of you have questions as well, because your questions are more important than mine. So be thinking of questions that you have, and after a couple rounds of mine, I'm going to open it up open it up to all of you. So to kick us off, I would love to hear actually from each of you. I'm not going to have each of you answer every question, but I would love to hear from each of you how you found or how you created, Sarah, your current position. I think that is a common question we get at the Career Center, right? We do this traditional job search very, very well. Come on campus, here's all these companies, here's an info session. But when you want something that's mission driven, it's not necessarily as standard or as cut and dry as it is. So, and I know each of you had really varying paths. So I would love to hear from each of you. And Sarah, since you did create yours, why don't you kick it off and share how you created Greener Pastures and kind of the avenues you went to get where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Maggie. So yes, Maggie mentioned, I'm the founder of Greener Pastures. So my path to figuring out what I want to do, how I want to do it, and where I want to do it involved a little bit of DIY. So rolling back the story just a little bit, I come from the grassroots organizing community. I went to UW-Madison for undergraduate, where I studied political science, and I think I just saw a woot woot in the crowd here, yay. And went to UW-Madison with the intent of studying journalism, because I was really passionate about reading about, writing about, learning about different problems in the world that got me excited. But it was while I was a student on campus that I got an opportunity to start volunteering as a student, doing some grassroots organizing on a campaign to protect Wisconsin's lakes from runoff pollution, from factory farms, from consolidated, often corporate owned, highly concentrated mega farms that pose a lot of problems for human health, for the environment, for animal welfare. And I started to realize those impacts while starting to get my hands a little dirty with grassroots organizing. So I took a kind of hard career turn into environmental organizing, grassroots organizing, public policy work, and democracy work, working with some major environmental nonprofits and democracy groups around making an impact in the issues that I cared about from that angle. But the more I went along in life and the more experience I got, I started realizing two things. The issues that I cared most about, the kind of intersection between food, animals, environment, democracy, were plaguing me. They were following me, and realizing that whether we're talking about clean water, whether we're talking about corporate influence in our democracy, whether we're talking about the individual access that folks have to healthy, affordable, nutritious food, the issue factory farming really sat at the center of those in really nasty, gnarly ways that got me interested and exciting from a problem solving perspective, but also really angry from a civic perspective of like, dang, there's some problems that I just can't sit by and not do anything about. And like, I think anyone who has a mind for social problem solving started realizing that some of the solutions that I wanted to see existing were just not there on the landscape, and started realizing, hey, I think I might be able to bring something into the world that works on the issues that I care about, where I can bring the unique skills and experience that I have as a grassroots organizer, but also my little bit of journalism background and the visual storytelling background that I have together. And realized I really did not have the skill sets for that. And that is where the story of Carlson comes in. So I started Carlson and the Humphrey MPP dual degree in 2017 with the intent of using my time as a student to incubate. So brought all this into classes, did the SANS fellowship, used my time to learn, practice, test, and then was able to create the position that I then stepped out of school into. So let me pause there. Thanks so much, Maggie.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for telling us about that journey and that story. Leah, why don't you go next? How did you find your position with CECP?
Well, Sarah, thank you for sharing your story. we were leading a panel on food insecurity yesterday, or hosting a panel. And our moderator, I wish you were our moderator, because we did not have a good moderator, and it makes all the difference. And I had you in mind, but they had somebody else in mind. So anyway, sidebar. But so CECP, yes, next time for sure. I became familiar with CECP a few years before my MBA, because I've always been sort of CSR curious, I guess. And Chief Executives for Corporate Purpose used to be called the Committee Encouraging Corporate Philanthropy. They've changed the meaning of the letters, but I had stumbled upon them a few years ago in my research, and just became really curious about CECP as a thought leader, and had made some attempts to network there, because I spotted that the managing director is based here in the Twin Cities, and I ended up actually getting to connect with CECP through the MBA, because that managing director is a Carlson alum from the Ventures Enterprise, and I had her on a panel, and so she, we continued to talk, and she called me in to do some temporary work over the summer last year, and we were able to parlay that into a full-time position where I'm essentially consulting and advising companies on, much smaller scale than Elizabeth would have been doing in Deloitte, and hers were, I'm guessing, not CSR based, but maybe. But it's been through that networking piece was really how I got connected. And Maggie knows I'm an aggressive networker, so I'm sure we'll talk about that more.
She's a very good networker. Thank you, Leah. And I'm glad you already touched on your networking piece, because that's one thing to drive home from this panel for sure. Elizabeth, tell us about, I know you mentioned you were at Deloitte first, but talk to us about maybe the journey to TeamShares.
Yeah, nothing against consulting as a career. I'll start with that. It helped me achieve some very important goals. It was a great experience. Glad I did that. Glad I'm no longer there. And I'll say kind of maybe the first step in my journey to TeamShares is kind of reaching a point with consulting where I was very unhappy. And part of that was the amount of time and effort and anxiety that was going into projects and clients that I didn't personally feel invested in. And so I think that was something that was causing me a lot of stress. And I'm someone of a disposition where I'm going to just work a lot. I'm going to get the things done. And so when the work that I'm presented with is something that isn't actually motivating, it became very, very draining. And so it was something where I was determining what was next. That was a big part of the equation, was how do I find a role where, because I'll back up and say, in my mind, this may be a false dichotomy. My options were either find a job where I didn't need to care about it and I could just like do my 9 to 5 and check out and not worry, or find something where my passion actually justified the amount of effort and time that I was putting into it. So those may not have been the actual options in front of me, but that's what it felt like. So I actually took some time off for that exact discernment. And initially, I'd say one of the challenges of leaving consulting is there isn't like a clear-cut next step. There are so many options that you can take. And so I was actually interviewing at several of the more typical exit opportunities: strategy at Target, strategy at Best Buy, work with like an AI company, but wasn't really excited about the opportunities. And I actually got an outreach from TeamShares. I was recruited. It was a company I had not heard of at the time. Their website was super minimal. I wasn't even sure it was a real thing. And that's part of why I reached out to Maggie initially about this, was because it's this very cool company that's doing something really important, but it's very small and trying to grow very quickly. And an MBA is such a valuable asset when coming in to lead a small business, to understand financial statements, to understand the accounting, and to think about growth, and to do the employee engagement and education. And so when the opportunity was presented to me, everything else fell away. It was the people were so genuine. The opportunity was very exciting. I had no idea what kind of company I was going to be in, but was very motivated by the employee ownership model and the issue that was being solved. And maybe another caveat that I'll put in there is that maybe is adjacent to what I'm doing is the idea of entrepreneurship through acquisition, which is another way to kind of find your own way to add impact. And that's something that my husband had actively been working on and had purchased a company that sort of fits the same demographic profile of what TeamShares was looking for. So I was very familiar with the problem and something that I was having daily conversations about. And so it really aligned with something that I was already informed and passionate about. And it really seemed like just an incredible opportunity at the time and has proven to be so.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for being so candid too about that. I think it's such a real reaction. It's a question I have for later, so I appreciate you already touching on that. Samantha, tell us about your journey to shared capital.
Absolutely. And since we just heard from Elizabeth, I want to say there's a really cool overlap in what we do. So I actually finance conversions to employee ownership on a smaller scale, I think, than where Elizabeth works. But yeah, I'm so glad we're getting a chance to let you all know about this space, because I think it's something I wasn't aware of when I was in the MBA as this world of work that I could be engaged in. And I think there's lots of different places for people to plug in. So my journey, I come from anti-hunger policy and social service policy background. And, you know, there's anyone who's kind of worked in policy space or organized in policy space knows that resources are a really important part of what gets done in our country, in our state, in our cities. And resources can be social capital, but a lot of times they're also financial capital and come from tax dollars, but they also come from corporations and a lot of foundations, a lot of different sources. And so doing that work, I was just constantly struck by how little I knew about where resources were coming from and how to influence the movement of resources. And that's where this kind of black box of business lived for me, and where the MBA came in. I also was a dual degree like Sarah. I also did the public policy degree and graduated in 2019. I didn't say that in my intro, but yeah, it's a 3-year program with the 2 degrees. And I was in the, which enterprise was I in? I was in the, obviously, the finance funds enterprise. And I also had a chance to be in a special consulting enterprise kind of project that was both through Carlson, but also had a social impact focus. And our client was actually Hennepin County. So lots of great opportunities to learn the finance side of things, the resource side of things at Carlson, and then actually connect with certain clients in the Twin Cities. You guys hear this all the time. Networking is so important. And that is exactly how I found the job that I have now, both on the policy and business side. Made a lot of connections, was going to coffees every week. And one of my mentors, actually through Humphrey, was the executive director of my organization now. It's a very small organization. It's 11 people. We're a national loan fund, but only 11 staff. And so I didn't really think there would ever be a position for me, or at least not on my MBA timeline. But I graduated in 2019, and there was a job like a month after I graduated. And through my network of people in the Twin Cities, someone said, I don't think Samantha's happy at her current job. You should let her know that there's something open. And so the MBA is definitely the reason that I got the role that I did in lending, because I had no lending experience. But I think the reason I knew about it was the broader social impact network I had been building over those 3 years. And so it was really a combination of the networking as well as the expertise and skills that I gained during my time in grad school that I found the job.
Thank you, Samantha. So you both, a couple of you have already touched on networking. Thank you. are there since each of you are from the Carlson MBA program or a dual degree, share with the students any tips you have on what they should do while in school if this is the career path they're looking for. I know networking will be part of that advice, but if you want to elaborate on that, or if you want to add anything different, and then I'll just let this popcorn as they come to you. Who would like to go first? And anyone have an idea? Sarah.
I can go first also to reset the circuit last time. Yeah, I'll take a tact other than the networking advice. I would say two different things that for me personally were really, really helpful, and that I would recommend to anybody thinking about a social venture or social impact career, which is number one, you can volunteer yourself into your dream job. And number two, do qualitative research with the stakeholders or shareholders that you want to be serving in the future. So I'll say like a quick sentence on each of those. I cannot tell you how many people that I know in the social impact space have worked themselves into a job by starting off volunteering, interning, offering to do a project or a side hustle or something like that with a group, an organization, a new venture that they were really excited about. We have had folks with Greener Pastures work themselves into positions that are now turning the wheels of our impact because they came to us saying, hey, I want to volunteer. Hey, I want to intern. So I'd recommend that for anybody. And then I am the biggest nerd when it comes to qualitative research. I could waste all our time today talking about why I love it so much. But I think if you have the opportunity to do either a class-based or an extracurricular-based or a service project-based or a something qualitative research project where you get to interview, get a real sense on insights, and get to spend a lot of time talking with the stakeholders that you want to be serving or solving problems for in the future, that is one of the best uses of time you can possibly put in. It'll help you with coursework, it'll help you with skill building, but it's one of those ways to network where you are learning at the same time. And for folks like me who like networking is like, but like making friends or doing research is yay. So if you can turn those activities where you can learn into ones where you can also be building out your network, that is like gold for where you can be spending your time. And if you're like, ooh, I would really like to do that with Greener Pastures, give me a holler because we've got opportunities for that too.
There you go, perfect plug. And not only do you get to like, learn while you're doing the research and network, you're also showcasing your skill in that way too, right? Without saying I'm really good at qualitative research or whatever, you're showing that. So I love those tips. Thank you. Anyone else? Advice while a student?
So I will talk about networking because it is definitely, like Sarah said, it's one of those words where you hear it and it just feels kind of grimy, or it did for me for a long time. But I came to Carlson specifically with the goal of growing my skills and growing my network. So I think with what Sarah said, I echo a lot of that. I think that attitude of being willing to like pilot and test through volunteering, through classes, through things like that is super important. I have some very tactical networking tips, which Maggie knows. Like I tell people, if I'm telling you this, it's not a suggestion. It's a like, this is how you do it to get people to respond. And I think a lot of that, what it comes down to is like, be curious. Like if you can listen to people, if you can draw out stories, whether that's through qualitative research or just conversations, like if you are open and curious, you can find a way to connect with other people. And that's what it is. And I think it's important to know that you don't have to necessarily know going into a conversation what that connection will be. You don't have to force it. It may not be a match. Like it may just be a conversation where you learn, oh, maybe that's not it. And that's a gift. Like it is as much a gift to figure out what you don't want as to figure out where you want to go more. And I think that's just super critical. One book that Maggie and I have talked about that I really like is called The Career Stories Method. And it's about crafting, figuring out what your brand is, again, in a not grimy feeling way. And Carrie Twigg, who's the author of that book, she talks about networking as if you treat it as your job to make whoever you're in the room with as comfortable as possible and take a hospitality approach, it takes the onus off of you and, how to prove yourself and why you want to be in the conversation. Again, it goes back to just being generous and curious with your time and your thoughts. I think the other piece, going back to piloting things that you want to try and you want to learn more about. I truly believe that particularly if you're in the full-time MBA program, you are leaving opportunity on the table if you do not take at least one class outside of Carlson. I took classes at Humphrey. I have friends who took classes with the School of Public Health. There are it just helps you think differently. And I come from a background that's very strange and disjointed, from teaching and costume design and commercial real estate and affordable housing development. Like, I'm a total weirdo, but it's those pieces that allow me to connect with a lot of people because I'm just bringing in a lot of perspectives and ideas that way. And any time that you can just learn and connect with a different group of people, you're going to expand your circle, you're going to expand your mindset. And it just makes for a richer educational experience. So I'll stop there. I could talk for a long time, but
I'm taking notes. So this is great. I am. Thank you. Thank you, Samantha and Elizabeth. I'll give you a chance if you want to add anything. Nope. All right, we're good.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute Maggie. I'm going to give just a piece of partially my advice, partially secondhand advice, which is
Perfect.
To the extent that you can identify what it is you actually want, work to build out that knowledge base and skill set. This is advice that I give to people going into consulting, because I went in, and this is from mistakes that I made. I went in being like, I want something where I don't need to choose. I want to have as many options as possible. And that, to the point that Leah made, can actually be more stifling. To the extent that you can cross things off the list and say, no, that's not what I want. That's not important to me. You are doing yourself a service. And the example I can give from a secondhand perspective is that's how my husband approached the MBA. He came from a nonprofit entrepreneurship background and wanted to get an MBA so that he could move into the for-profit social impact space. And he knew that the biggest gap in his understanding of that world was financial. So he really over-indexed in understanding financial statements and understanding modeling and understanding accounting, so that he could take all of his entrepreneurship and people skills and networking and passion and then layer on that additional learning. And so he went to Sunrise Banks immediately after graduating, which is a local community bank, B Corp, General Benefit Corporation, I think, public, I don't remember all of the specific qualifications, but that's the example that is someone who is very focused and driven with a social impact lens with a specific goal. So if that's you, think about what classes, what people are really going to feed that to find the right opportunities like Samantha did, and be able to direct your path. And if you don't have a specific idea, then cast a wide net and start crossing off options.
Wait, now I do want to say something very related, maybe slightly different track. I'll say that I was also like Elizabeth's husband, with the finance being the gap that I really wanted to fill and understand. And I didn't know exactly what the career would look like for me, especially it was a 3-year program. It's a long time to explore. I didn't know what my career would look like, but I knew that I wanted to be doing systems change work in finance. And throughout my 3 years, I feel like towards the beginning, I was a little bit more trying to fit into the boxes of different careers that were coming through the GBCC, or even at Humphrey, like in budget offices and cities. And it's like, that's not systems change work in finance. That wasn't, I had a lot of different roles that were really cool. They wanted me to work there full time. And I was like, actually, that's really boring. And so I think being super clear about whatever that mission is or changes that you want to see in the world, and not being afraid of the fact that like that won't resonate maybe with everybody, but the people that it does resonate with, and in this case, the role that I'm in now, like doing cooperative finance work is really systems change oriented. It's awesome. But there's not a ton of roles out there like it. I couldn't have imagined I would end up here, but I kept talking about what I wanted to see in the world.
I love what you're saying, and it's making me think of another question. And again, another plug to students. You can raise your hand or put your questions in the chat. Otherwise, I'll just keep going. But Samantha, this is sort of what you were talking about, and then I am curious to hear from others. But the advice to show with students that are focused on social impact is often show passion. Make sure you're showing your passion. Make sure you're engaging and leading with that. And we've gotten a couple pieces of advice. Like I love the idea of qualitative research or volunteering. Those are ways to do that. What is the best way that you've seen? And I think a lot of you are now in the seat where you're talking to people who are networking with you for jobs, or you're hiring. Elizabeth was just talking about hiring. What is the best way you've seen students or job seekers actually show passion enough that you're going to want to hire them or work with them for your organization? And then Josh, you will be next.
I'll dive in just because I've been doing a lot of interviewing recently, and did just extend an offer yesterday that was accepted. So that's exciting. Tough job market right now for people that are hiring. I think that when I'm interviewing somebody, whether it's a informational interview or a more formal, asking questions is a really good way to indicate, and not sort of like, so what do you do, right? But showing that you've done the research into the company, if there's a specific mission that it's focused on, that you understand what that is. And if you don't understand, you're asking specific questions. If you're like, okay, so you're employee owned, but what does that mean? And an example is most people that ask the question to me are assuming we're an ESOP, which we're not. We're actually we're a share ownership based employee owner setup. And so it is different than what most people assume in most models that are in the market. And so if people are asking questions and it's just like, okay, you're somebody, agnostic of the role, I'm looking for people who are engaged by the model, because what we're trying to do is build a long-term sustainable company that does not need to worry about its next major leadership transition, which is what I'm navigating right now. And so being able to show that the person, the company, the mission, and that you're interested and you want to know more, and to put the caveat in there of not making it seem canned or anything, think about what you actually want to know. Go approach it as though I'm sure you're interviewing, you want the job, but if you approach it from a perspective of what would make me not want the job, what do I really need to know to understand if this is the right fit? Make it a fact-finding mission for yourself too, and just make it engaging, so it's not just kind of the cursory, I need to ask questions, so I'll ask questions.
Thank you. Great advice, Elizabeth. Josh, you are up. Thank you for patiently raising your hand and waiting.
No worries. Thank you. Yeah. So first, huge thank you to all of you for making the time to present and panel. This has been awesome to listen to. So there's maybe two parts to this question, right? One is, as a current student making this investment in the MBA, right? Trying to make sure that when I come out on the other side, I think what is that balance for placing into a corporate job, like Elizabeth, I know you spoke to your experience with Deloitte, right? And I think what I'm trying to figure out right now is if I try to go corporate, then social impact, right? Or try to marry corporate and social impact, go to a place, like US Bank that would potentially have partnership capabilities with something like your organization and, Samantha. how do you maybe do you have thoughts on like how you would coach somebody in my position, right? On like what is the pathway to follow, right? Knowing that there is some maybe realism that like this is an emerging space, right? So I don't know that it has like a huge capacity for like MBA, like fresh out of MBA, right? Like you all are doing these cool roles and stuff like that. Is there space for me, right, to come in, or is there going to be like a holding pattern that I'll need to hold, and keep poking at it until I'm getting at a lot of different things, right? And trying to figure out exactly like where is this fit, right? And like, is there a direct pathway into these careers from an MBA, or do I need to be prepared to dance around a little bit until that fit emerges? So maybe make of that what you will.
I think that's a really good question, Josh, and it's one that we hear a lot in the Career Center. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah. Can I ask one follow-up, Josh? Is salary at all something that you're thinking about as you make this move?
Yes and no. I mean, I made 40,000 as a nonprofit, employee the last like 10 years, right? But also I'm making a huge investment in the MBA, and so need to figure out the pay off the loans intersection, all of that stuff. But ultimately maybe hoping for something that is north of 80, 90, right? But it doesn't need to be 200.
Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate that. I personally have very low tolerance for roles that don't fit, like the kind of draining dynamic you were talking about, Elizabeth, really resonates with me. I don't like being in that space. I'll also say, like, I don't come for wealth. I didn't have wealth, that I could access, or even extra disposable income that I could access coming out of the MBA. So I was balancing these, salary with mission and fit. But I think there are, I guess I will, as far as coaching you, even the fact you mentioned US Bank, like they have a whole community development arm. There are actually well-paying careers in this space. They're harder to get into in the sense that there's fewer of them, but they're out there. So I think to the extent that you're being really targeted in the relationships that you're building and trying to tailor yourself to some of these roles we do know exist that are in the 80 to 100 range, starting out of the MBA. I think it's possible, and I'd love to, support in thinking through some people that you could reach out to. I mean, I'm more connected in the finance space here locally, but I'm sure others also have similar analogous organizations they could think of that would be good fits.
Can I chime in as well to offer the perspective from the nonprofit or like non-corporate side here? Is like, I really appreciate this question, Josh, because when for Greener Pastures in particular, like we're a very small emerging nonprofit where we're in our first handful of years, and we often have those challenges of we are investing in a program that we are trying to figure out, can it be self-sustaining and can it scale and can it serve community and help push the food system forward in a whole set of ways. And the folks who would be best to come on in and shape those programs are ones with MBA skill sets. But MBAs often don't realize that there is enormous blue ocean, or whatever word we want to use to describe, that there's opportunities for MBAs to come in and work themselves into a really interesting and financially self-sustaining for them personally and their personal finances jobs within this sector. My biggest challenge on hiring as an executive director is I will often bring a position description forward for something around our visual storytelling work or our farm to table experiences work or this new program that we have around helping folks connect with and purchase from local farms. And the skill sets that we need for someone to come in and do that is someone who can come into a job in the same way that you would come into an enterprise, and take take a brief and craft something from the ground up and put in the effort and put in the energy and put in that work to help create a sustainable business model within that program. And therein come really interesting job opportunities for MBAs. So I would also give folks a nudge of, if there's an issue you're really passionate about or a nonprofit you're really passionate about working for, if you have a vision for how you can enhance a program with your nonprofits, with your MBA skill set in a nonprofit setting, there are incredible ways to make sustainable jobs in those space. I would just encourage MBAs to think bigger and broader about what can actually be achieved at small and scrappy nonprofits. Yeah. That's my soapbox for the day.
Thank you, Sarah. Marissa, you've got your hand. Oh, Elizabeth, you unmuted. Please chime in.
I'll try to be real quick. So again, because you mentioned US Bank, I'll give kind of a perspective of, obviously like local business, huge opportunity. That was actually a company that I interviewed with when I was looking for an exit out of Deloitte. And one of the things about big companies like that, and Best Buy is similar, I think Target is similar, they're heavily networked. And the social impact space, because it is growing, it is appealing, getting hired directly into a position like that, Samantha's point, is challenging. But if you identify a company that you actually feel values aligned with, and there is another position open at that company, getting another job there and then actively networking to get the job you want when the next position becomes available. Get to know the people on the team, get to know the people that are making the hiring decisions, and then you can be the person who already knows the team, already knows the work, already has expressed, ideas and passion for what they're doing, and you can kind of sidestep into that. So if you're thinking about these larger companies that have a social impact component, that's probably a really good way to go about it if you can identify a company where you really feel like that's going to be a long-term good option for you.
Can I add one thing quick? This started with Samantha asking how important salary was to you, and I think a pitfall that comes in being interested in social impact and entrepreneurship is we think that the mission should be enough. But you can't, you have to be able to eat. You have to be able to meet your basic needs. And it is not wrong to advocate for yourself. I think particularly for women, particularly for people in social impact, there's this unspoken rule of, if you talk about salary, you're not committed to the mission. No, no, girls got to eat, right? And and Sarah's point, being a financially stable, sustainable organization, you can't do that if you money is means to an end, but you need to look out for yourself. And so I highly recommend to everyone on this, if you haven't taken negotiation strategy, do it. Get clear on what you're willing to put up with and not put up with. What level of ambiguity are you okay with? What size of organization are you okay with? Each of us on this call, we're working with very small organizations. And Maggie knows this. I learned this from doing the De Podesta Fellowship, where I was working independently on a mission that was very important to me, that the mission wasn't enough. I needed connection, I needed community. And I knew after graduation, I was going to need a role where I had benefit, I had health insurance, and taxes were taken out in advance, because that's really hard if you're freelancing. So there are logistical pieces to get really clear on, and it is not wrong, and it doesn't make you care any less. It's just, if you want to do your best work, you need to have your needs met. And so recognize what they are, name them, and don't feel bad about advocating for yourself. Because if you don't ask, you don't get. And the worst that happens is they say no.
Absolutely. And then there's 2 recommendations in the chat. This is for the recording, because the chat doesn't come through the recording, for the negotiations class at Humphrey. Additionally, I will say from this perspective, I'm glad the salary piece came up. in the spirit of pay transparency, you know, there's a big push, and there are many states, an ever-growing number of states that are requiring it. In the Career Center space, it is not as common. So last year we benchmarked where we stood with OCR. We were at 11% of our company, of our positions being, and this is OCR, but more traditional. We're pushing for that. So each year, our goal this year is 20%. So we're going to try to keep pushing that our postings and our on-campus recruiting opportunities are transparent and pay, because it is a big piece of it. So I'm really glad that that came up. Okay, we have time for one more question, because I did promise these people that they could get like bathroom breaks and lunch before they go take their 1 o'clock meetings. But Marissa, you've been waiting so patiently. So go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Sure, thank you. First of all, hi everyone. My name is Marissa Bestie. I'm in the part-time MBA program. And I just want to say thank you as well, because this has been really inspirational, motivational. So my question is, was there anything that surprised you once you actually made the move into social impact that maybe like didn't come across through networking, or that you learned only once you were working within social impact? And maybe the answer is no, maybe networking was so helpful and you totally knew what you're getting into.
Right. Lead us off. Oh, Leah, you go first.
Okay. I think there definitely there have been lots of learnings, and I think it's, one is that, you know, when I talk, you can be very passionate, and it's important to take care of yourself, like recognizing when you need to close the laptop. Like, it's important to have really strong boundaries. And if you don't enforce them, no one else will. And it goes back to that piece of like, if you like, burnout is very real, and you can't do good work and you can't serve a mission that you care about if you're not taking care of yourself. So like, I'm the one who will tell my coworkers, like, says you're out of office, so you're not allowed to respond to things on Teams. Like, I'm the one who's heckling them and being like, get out of here, like, go live your life. Because it's, again, it's very easy when you're driven and you're high achieving to just keep pushing. And you can do a lot of work, or you can do good work. And you can do better work if you, like, again, take care of yourself, respect your boundaries, enforce your boundaries.
Thank you, Leah. Sarah, you had unmuted too, I think.
Yeah, I 100% second what you just said, Leah. And I think the thing that I would add in is, like, if you're in a venturing space or a nonprofit space or any space where you are on a really scrappy team, you know, in Carrollton, we get somewhat specialized, right? Like, you go down a particular track in an enterprise, or you go try to get a specific set of things to get a concentration or something like that. Like, when rubber hits the road, you really are a jack of all trades out there if you're working in a scrappy organization, nonprofit, startup. And the thing that I would encourage folks to just hold on to, remembering if you want to work in that space, is you might find out that you're using a wider selection of your skills on a daily basis than you had planned for. Every day of my job is not like entrepreneurship and nonprofit strategy and stuff like this. Some days I'm like trying to figure out how to get access to the software so my staff can do this thing. You know, there's like a lot of operations and technical and figuring out systems. And so, you know, I just encourage folks to think about, you know, if you want to be in a social impact setting that is like very scrappy, that is very startup-y, that is nonprofit-y, like get ready to use every skill in your bag, like get ready to use everything that you've got. And I do agree with Leah that the flip side of that is like unapologetic rest, like unapologetic logging off when it is the time. Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm taking notes. I'm taking, like I said, I'm taking notes for all of this. We are at 12:51 and I have so many more questions that I want to ask. But again, I said I promised these folks lunch. Some great advice, volunteer for projects, think about qualitative research that you could do as a way of networking and showcasing your skill. Identify what you want and then build that knowledge base. Like, right, if you have a gap in finance, build that base. Be clear about your mission and what you want. Be curious. And also, I love this piece that Leah provided with networking. Don't force the outcome. Don't think you know how that networking meeting is going to result. You're going to be disappointed, right? Like, let things happen organically. Thank you. Yes, please share your emails, panelists. Thank you so much. And then this also reminds me of a quote I just heard that the VP of Sustainability at REI said. I was talking to an alumni and just yesterday, and he was sharing that this quote that I'm kind of going to butcher, but you're going to get the gist of it, is that in all of human history, we could pollute for free, and we can't do that anymore. So now every single change across all businesses, from human capital to environment to sustainability, we have to think about the social implications of business in that. And because of that, there's more opportunities, right? Like what Samantha was saying, US Bank now has, all of these different companies have their social arms. So these women have paved the way, and they had really tough job searches. I remember it was scrappy, and now there are more and more opportunities like this out here. So can I say that you all are willing to network? Since I see emails in there. All right, emails are in the chat. Thank you all so incredibly much for being here. I really, really appreciate you taking the time. And we will stay in touch, and yeah, go have some lunch now. Enjoy. Thank you, ladies.